Regular.
Regular.
I heard something else. Okay. Congress over the summer when they were really sort of ramping up the discussion. Yo, welcome to the Stoop. Welcome to AutoBlack. AutoBlack is a discussion-based podcast hosted by 5 Black architects. We talk about everything from architecture to design to culture to politics. So if you've been with us before, you back again, welcome back. If it's your first time tuning in, welcome to your new favorite podcast. As always, I am here with my friends, at least 3 of which are here today. You know, everybody
Hey, look,
else
you
is
don't got no
busy,
friends, Rob.
summertime, trying to be outside. But I'm one of your hosts. My name is Rob Grooms. We also got with us Jamar,
Yo, what it do, baby?
and we got Xavier.
What's up? How you doing?
Yeah, this is you got the fellas today. It's reminiscent of man time. We
Hey, look, you can't
So,
bring that up on the podcast like that, man. Time.
Nah, that's what it is. It's man time. It's for us to get together and chat as men. You know, we can be authentically ourselves. We Black men, so we about to give this episode today from the perspective of Black men.
I'm all for it.
That's
More.
what it
This
is.
kind of reminds you of the barbershop a little bit.
Hey, definitely like that. I mean, I think I'm the only one of us that still go to the barbershop, but
Yeah, because I
know.
ain't paying $60 for a shape up. Like what?
You ain't have to say that. You ain't have to say all of that.
Oh, was that a dig? I'm looking rough, but dang.
It was.
It's not a dig. It's reality. Y'all both opted to cut your own hair now.
Not everybody
I mean,
know.
I commend y'all. That is brave. That is bravery on your part. I commend you.
I'm putting that.
But I can't
I'm
do
putting the cap on now, because man, everybody going. Oh yeah, that's why hairline look a little crooked.
Yeah, well, we also getting older, man. 30 plus. You know, you just
Whoa.
reality of
After certain-
aging.
Still 29. We talking
Yeah, after a certain while, you don't care.
That's why it's wearing
I
a hat
will-
actually.
I will tell you though, every haircut I get a haircut every 2 weeks, twice a month, $45 a pop.
And it's without tip, I know.
And that's my tip. That's my tip. $45 a pop. Like, and I always pay my barber on Cash App. And man, when you know on Cash App, you can go to how much you've paid to date to an individual person. Stupid money. Stupid money.
Yo, last time I got my hair cut, it was $20 plus tip. No, I think it was $20 with tip. So that shows you how long ago I got my hair cut.
Jeez. I remember back in the day, haircuts was like $15.
Yeah, 12, 15, yeah.
Yeah. And you know, around the holiday season, I would get my barber like 20, 25 just because, you know, it's an extra tip. But man, now the price of haircuts are ridiculous.
Yeah, like I think you're really paying for
I
their
should've
Adobe
been involved.
subscription at this point, so they can be posted on Instagram.
I mean, like I said, I ain't gonna cut my own hair, so I'm still gonna pay it for it. You know, ain't got no choice.
Hey, look, your hair look good though, Rob.
Thank you, I appreciate it. The Beijing started to fade a little bit because nowadays all the barbers also touch your hairline up with the little spray in,
Yep.
the little spray in filler. I used to hate it. I used to hate it with a passion, but everyone does it now, so it's just like, all right, man, just make it look natural at least.
Now it's gonna be just straight across, no like arcing there, just straight.
Yo, it'd be looking weird too because like nobody's hairline is like that perfectly straight. It's just it looks like a geometry problem, like some trigonometry or something like that. It's just yeah.
Just gotta go. Just
But
gotta go natural, man. That's all. Just go ahead, go natural. Cut your own hair. Save you $45 a month. Soon you're gonna be having Lil Rob getting a haircut.
No, that's $90 a month. He said twice a
Ooh,
week.
twice a month.
yeah.
That's how much I tie. That's a different story. That's a different story.
So that's a whole different story. But the reason why I don't cut my own hair, man, because I'm gonna end up when I'm trying to shape myself up, I'm gonna have an architectural squiggly line. Yeah, but you know, it's good to be back on the podcast recording. For all of you all out there, we took a break. We was tired. we had a lot of stuff to do. People was going on vacations, and so we decided to create summer hours, and we took a break for the month of July. So you're listening to this. It's now going to be in August. That basically explains the difference. And but we're back, excited to be back. Have a pretty good topic to talk about. Um, it's funny. We were kind of as a team just kind of discussing some of the the podcast and sort of what we've done and where we're sort of going to take it in terms of the direction of the topics. And we've really been talking a lot about really the issue of affordability and just sort of different consequences or ways to address some of the affordability crises in the cities. And we've talked about it from a perspective of how does zoning play into it? What does the politics of NIMBYism have to do with it? And so while we were sort of discussing that, we kind of brought up the idea of like tiny homes and how tiny homes is a potential solution to address the affordability issue. And I think we were even sort of talking about how tiny homes can be a way to obtain home ownership, even for, especially for people of color who are oftentimes get priced out of this market or, subject to predatory lending and, go down the list as why, we aren't we don't make up the same percentage of homeowners as our counterparts. And I was thinking about this and I was thinking about this in terms of how this tiny home movement can also how it relates to Black people and where what role does it play? And I have a rather bold claim, and feel free to debate me on the topic. But I think if this is something that is disseminated to Black people, Black communities in large quantities, and we there's a movement that's gaining steam about how tiny homes can address the issue of home ownership specifically towards the Black community and sort of in a massive amount of way. I think that it would be a bad idea. And I think it would be a mistake. And I think that it has the potential to be detrimental to Black people. Um, and it has a potential to be a detrimental to Black families from the perspective of I think it will dramatically change the nucleus or the makeup of the Black family. And the biggest reason is why I believe this is because it is a non-traditional type of real estate home ownership. And I think that I'm just a person that I think we need to Black people need to stay away from not and I don't mean this to be to sound all inclusive, but I think in large I would prefer Black people to stay away from non-traditional ways of real estate and all of that just because of the inability um to because of the novelty of it. I don't think that it has real potential to increase one's net worth. And obviously we look at home ownership as sort of the largest vehicle many Americans will increase their network and transfer generational wealth. And for that reason, in mass quantities, I think that the idea of a tiny home for Black people as an alternative to home ownership can be detrimental.
So you want Black folks just to keep renting?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that tiny home, like the idea of a tiny home, isn't a good solution in masses. Now, obviously, again, I'm not saying like there's certain situation where it might make sense for individuals and stuff like that. But if we're trying to build a number of tiny home communities outside of Metro Atlanta, outside of DC and PG County and all of that, I think that's a bad idea.
So my pushback to that is that we know how much the cost of a house has risen since the pandemic, and any entry into home ownership, whether it is temporary or long term, it should be viable and should be allowed because the reality is a tiny home is 400 square feet or less. I think some places say 500 square feet or less, but yes, it's not a significant amount of space. But a tiny home costs between what $30,000 and $50,000, and then if you want to get some higher end, it can go obviously more than that. But the cost of a tiny home is significantly cheaper than a sometimes three bedroom home, depending on where you live at. And most major metropolitans in the U.S., you can't find a home for under $300,000, and that's like one that's probably you have to do a complete renovation. So you're going to throw another maybe 50 to 80 to $100,000 in renovations just to get it to be somewhat livable. I've seen in Boston, there was a home that had caught fire and was literally just you had to tear it down. The land it sat on by itself was, I think the structure itself was, I want to say $600,000 just for a burnt out shell. And so if there's
Wait, that's how much you was selling for?
that's how much it was selling for the burnt out shell. Obviously, you're at that point you're paying for the land. Let's be real. But you still got to demo that. You got to dispose of that, and then you got to still have an architect that come through and basically design another house for you. So any way that allows people to get home ownership, I'm not going to knock them for it. Like if they want to do a tiny home, do it. Now, to your point about the nucleus and how that may destroy it, I can see your point because again, 400 square feet it's not enough space for a family. But again, with the cost of home ownership being for a tiny home only $30,000, let's just say $50,000 on the higher end. Compare that to putting down. That's a down payment for a lot of houses now. And if you pay that, let's say you're paying, I don't know, let's say you're paying $2,000 in rent. $2,000 in rent times 12 is $24,000. That's already half of your $50,000 that you put in. And if you're doing that for multiple years, you're not getting any of that money back. And once you pay off that tiny home, you can use that money to save up to then start to look for a better home. So it's still an entry point to home ownership, even if it means that you are having to sacrifice a little bit of space.
So I would agree and disagree. I like tiny homes a little bit too small for me.
Personal
Like
preferences.
400, 500, 400, 500 square feet. That's pretty small. I lived in a studio for a while, and that was about 500 square feet. I don't
It's a
know
big
if I would
studio.
buy something.
That's a
Huh?
big studio.
No, it's not. That's
That actually
small.
is a big studio. I ain't gonna lie, because now they got micro studios for like 385. Wow.
Yeah, but I wouldn't buy something that was 500 square feet. I think it's a little bit too small. I don't know if there's like a recurring market that would buy behind me and then somebody to buy behind them. I don't know how strong that, especially in America, where I mean, generally, I think America has the second largest average house size in the world. So I think when you talk about like traditional in America, traditionally the houses are bigger, you have more stuff. There's more of a consumer culture in America, so you would need more space. So maybe if you go up to like 1,000 square feet or under, I think that's what the article you had pointed out had. They were like under 1,000 square feet, maybe like sort of like a really small row house that could be like considered a new starter house, and then you move into that as you graduate from college or something, and then after a few years when you start to have ideas of having a family, like Jamar said, like small house like that you can't really accommodate a family, and you move from a starter house to a new house. So maybe the smaller homes that are being created now for like black families or like pushed towards black people are should be considered more like starter houses, like for I was saying millennials, but we not that young anymore.
We still young. Don't lie to yourself. No grades here.
Yeah, maybe like 25-year-olds they move into those type of houses, and then after that you move into like a regular house, whatever regular is.
One thing I want to add to that too is like we always think about like the younger generation, but also let's think about the seniors, because a lot of seniors as they start to age, they can't go up into a second story floor or whatever, and they most times
You gonna have them climb up a ship's ladder into a
you
loft?
can have a bedroom on the ground floor. I mean, You could. I mean, they could do that too if they won't. Just don't roll over too much at night. But like that's another way too. Is like because a lot of people when they get older, they still want to have that freedom, but they can't afford to live in a 2,000 square foot home that they used to be able to afford in. And then a lot of people are like, oh, you can live with you can live with me, in my house. But it's like sometimes they still want their own freedom. So a tiny home could allow for that same type of freedom without having to give up, you know, living alone or living alone.
Yeah, look, I think for certain situations, obviously it makes sense, and that's very sort of case by case, right? But if just looking at it in general, right? Because again, as Black people, we have to contend with different things that our counterparts don't have to do, right? So when you think about sort of the traditional tiny home, the home on wheels, the one that's a little bit more mobile, well, not only you have the cost of the home that's going to be cheaper than buying a traditional home or renting for sure, right? But where you're gonna park it? Like you actually need land for it, and sometimes if you don't have, if so, that's another expense, right? And also if you don't have access to a network of friends and family who have a large enough plot of land where you can just park it in the back of their lot or whatever, like you're like the places in which you'll have to actually park that tiny home is going to be more in more rural places, and it's that's a whole issue. But then two, I think that the reason why I'm hesitant about it as being such a novelty, because again, if you think about um you know somebody purchases what they deem as a starter home, right? The idea is that this is your first home. You can maybe start a family, you can grow into it, but then eventually you'll sell that home, and the profit that you make from that home, because it's going to appreciate in value, becomes a down payment towards a much larger home, a much larger asset. In the way in which homes, residential home ownership is valued, is based off of similar product type in your 2 block radius, that has the similar specs, beds, bedrooms, square footage, blah blah blah, based off of how those homes are sold. That gives you the value to your home, like your value based off of how what your neighbors sell for. With a tiny home, a lot of banks still view it as really an RV. So how do you value that? And really, that's more of a depreciable asset than it is an actual asset that gains value. So you while you might be jumping into this starter home less than $100,000, are you really going to make money off of that in the next 5-10 years? Is that like, are you going to is are you what is it to make a $5,000 profit, or if you're going to make any profit? Like it's a non-traditional asset, and the market is going to view it as a non-traditional asset, and I'd be concerned about a lot of Black folks jumping into this novelty, and while on the upfront, they're saving costs in terms of rent and stuff like that, it's not a good investment to generate net worth
I'll push
and
back on
wealth.
that because again, if let's say that, and I didn't read the article that you sent, but let's say that these tiny homes actually have a foundation, so they're not on wheels. So you have a land, you have land you have occupied, and I'm assuming this is kind of like a commune style, maybe even like maybe even something similar to a like a HOA or maybe a condo association. So
It
like
was the Black dude that you had talked about who was developing the tiny home community in College Park, Georgia, outside of
Yeah,
Atlanta.
yeah. I still didn't read the article, but I think I read that like months ago. Um, but like,
You the one that told me
yeah,
about
I'm
it.
sorry, I'm sorry. It was months ago, man. We've been playing this conversation for like I don't know. I've been playing this conversation for at least 3 months, 4 months. But if it's something that's on foundations, which like I said, I'm assuming this community is, if I remember correctly. So that's different than a mobile tiny home because you are already sitting on land. And again, even if you're paying $100,000, if you stay in that house for 5 years as a 20-year-old, from 20 to 25, or even 20, because a lot of people now don't have kids at 29. So if you're staying there from 25 to 29, the cost of your mortgage will probably be paid off within, I don't know, 3 4 years, depending on how much money you make. And again, the cost of rent, I think the average rent in America right now is $2,000. So again, $24,000 each year. Once you pay off that tiny home, the rest of that is just literally stuff you can put towards a down payment. So that is your net, and that is your net worth right there. That is your income, because you're saving all of that money that would have eventually been going to rent, which you are not able to have go towards your net and your net worth. That's savings.
Yes, I
Like
mean yes and
you probably won't
no.
be able to say. I mean, even I think because it's on the foundation. Sorry to cut you off, but I think because it's on the foundation, that actually makes it a little bit more. Uh, it will appreciate a little bit more because it's not mobile. It's not an RV.
Well, I mean, it turns it into the original tiny home, which is, you get you a double wide or something. A lot, what you see, like a lot of the trailer home communities that you see in more rural areas.
Exactly, but this isn't an urban area, right? You say it's in College Park, so and we know Atlanta is jumping off in real estate, so I think it appreciates depending on where you're at. Now, if you're in rural Kansas, sure, you're not going to get your money back. You're going to have what happens with those like older homes where there's four generations of family living on the same plot of land, and once they get tired of a home or they outgrow that home, they just let that home fall apart on the side of the road. You driven through like rural areas where you see the old shack that's kind of falling apart, and there's a new house beside it. Excuse me, because they can't sell that, right? It's just there's just no market for it really in that area. Um, so yeah, if you're in a rural area, you're gonna have that depreciation. But I think in most metropolitan areas, because of people are moving back to cities, and most, especially in the Sun Belt, I think you're gonna have that appreciation. It might not be as much as a single family home that's detached and 12 to 14 to 2,000 square feet, but it will appreciate. At least that's my thought.
Would you live in a tiny home?
I mean, my apartment is 600 square feet.
Nah, you
I
got
could do it.
amenities and all this other
I
stuff. I said,
Like X said.
would you live in a tiny
Like
home?
X said, I mean, I've lived in a 500 square foot studio. I can do it. It just and you know me, Rob. It depends on where it's located. If it's in the middle of a downtown city, I can do that. If I have to have a car and drive around everywhere, I wouldn't do a tiny home. That's it's
But then, again, I think if we have this idea of like, okay, what if we take the tiny home concept and make it urban, right? Then that starts to really affect the affordability of it, because you're paying for the cost of the land, right? And
Yeah.
it's going to be exponential in an urban core and in a place where it's really growing and active. And
but they're doing it in Atlanta.
again,
But I think College Park is isn't it more of like a suburban, like isn't it like a satellite of Atlanta?
yeah, it's near the airport, I believe.
So it's not really downtown because I can't imagine seeing a bunch of tiny homes in the downtown area of a city because the land is so expensive that it wouldn't be economically feasible. So it more likely like a outside satellite suburban that makes probably more financial sense like near airport than anywhere else.
Now, I will say the one drawback of a tiny home is, from what I've read, is that there's a lot of stress and anxiety that comes with some tiny homes because again, like you're confined in a small space, and that's why a lot of people are turned off by tiny homes. I also think it's just the idea of the American dream. A lot of people don't see a tiny home as viable because they want that big family home, especially now because there is a lack of starter homes. People are automatically jumping to a more traditional non-starter home that is like again the 15 to 20,000 square feet. And so I think because that idea of the white picket fence and the personal driveway, the personal automobile, tiny homes aren't ideal in the U.S. because of how we have been trained to think about how we should live. But anyway, back to my point. I think the downside of it is if depending on where it is, and usually you see tiny homes that are near nature because you need that reprieve from your tiny space to go someplace. So in an urban space, it wouldn't work as well if there isn't that connection to nature or if there isn't like a park nearby or something that allows a person to have more than just like that 400 square feet. They need more third places or third spaces that, is commonly and honestly leaving the U.S. because we're getting rid of our third spaces. Movie theaters, malls, all those places. There's no place for people to gather outside of their home, so that's why they retreat to these fortresses.
Well, I mean, you bring a point though. I think there's this American notion of trying to achieve the white picket fence and the large yard and all that, and the large square footage home, and I think it's also very American idea that you need to have home ownership. Uh, you need to own everything. Like you'd be surprised at how many people reject the idea of leasing a car. How many people who are obsessed with the idea of home ownership. And granted, I mean, I'm a home owner myself, so I'm speaking. I'm sort of contradicting sort of what I'm saying. However, you know, the first home that I owned wasn't like our primary residence. Me and my wife, we made a conscious decision that we want to be homeowners, but like let's flip how we're getting our first home, and we actually bought investment property out in Lynchburg, Virginia. Um, Much different cost of living for like we bought a house for under $100,000, and that's just rental income. And so like I mean, there's the I think
You're the problem.
to your point, huh?
You're the problem.
I'm the
You are
problem
taking an affordable house to rent it for your own personal gain. How dare you?
because
This is
I am
America. You don't need two houses.
because
I'm
because I
joking. I'm just
am
joking.
I am being also a capitalist. See, that's also another problem. Yeah, black people don't like other black people to be capitalists. See, that's why I had a
Yeah.
problem with Jay-Z when he made that deal with the
Hey, look.
NFL. I don't like black people to play
Hey,
capitalism.
look. Is your rent market rate or is it above market?
It's market rate.
Is it below market?
It's market rate.
Exactly. We need more affordable options. Market rate is not market rate anymore.
I don't get that.
It's just because again the cost of rent just keeps going up, and market rate is not what people can afford. That's the reality of it in most cities. I mean, Lynchburg's different. Let's be real. Lynchburg's a little different, but yeah.
How is Lynchburg different? I was just about to say, corporation. You rather a corporation buy up the house
No,
than you
I
buy
rather
it.
I
I'm just a,
rather I
I'm
rather
just a small
people who
I'm
need
just
the
a
house
small
buy a
business
house.
owner. I'm just a small business owner that's trying to provide a service. I'm not Walmart.
But you're trying to be Walmart at some point. Would you be okay? Like I got a couple hundred. You wouldn't be mad if you got a couple of hundred properties on your belt, would you? No.
I don't want a couple hundred single family homes, man. That sounds
Yeah,
But
miserable.
would you buy an apartment building if you could?
Absolutely.
Exactly. And then would you buy another one, right? With
Absolutely.
that money that you bought with the last one, and you buy
Listen,
another
let me
one,
tell
and
you
you
what
buy another one,
the
and then
I
next year you
look,
Walmart.
the idea is that I get up like 3 to 5 of those single family home rental units, cash those in for an apartment building. That's the idea.
So, all right. So, this we kind of go off topic. What about flipping? Do you feel like flippers are better because they're allowing people to buy a house that they've flipped, or are they just the same as people who are buying into rent?
Um it depends. I mean, there's some people that do it better than others. There's some people that actually care about the product that they deliver, and then you got some people who are doing it for the cheap and
yeah.
and trying to sell you a luxury product that's very cheaply and poorly made, and and then the end user is the one who um suffers.
Exactly. I mean, and that's what renters too. That's what landlords too. It's the same issue, you know.
Yeah, but see,
I mean, I think with flipping though, just one sec. With flipping though, I think you just got to do your research. In some cases, the flipper is just providing a service. They're taking something that was broken down and making it into something that maybe is a little bit better. So, like as a buyer, you got to look at what the house was probably worth before, and then what the house is worth after, and then see if the improvements that they made are, worth what you're gonna put into that house. So that I think if it's like that, then it's a little bit different.
Yeah, the one thing I say too is like I feel like at least with you, Rob, because obviously I know you. Like you're not one of those landlords that would be like, "Hey, I'm just gonna rent, fix this place up, rent it to somebody, and just rent it as is." Right? Like you're gonna be a long term landlord, so it's not like something that's like quick cash for you. So you're invested in that property. You're not trying to flip it and sell it really quickly at some point or whatever. So there's a difference there. It's all about the intentions of the landlord.
thank you for the compliment,
I, I
Jerome.
had I
I
had to
appreciate that.
save you after I came for you.
But
But as a developer, do you think that you could buy like a tiny house and rent that out? Like, do you think like as a homeowner who also rents a house, do you think you could rent out a tiny house? Like, is that feasible in this market?
so I have a friend who is a real estate investor. He probably has 10 plus properties. Um, and he had brought to me an idea of something that he was doing where he bought a piece of land in, I think, Roanoke or somewhere, or maybe in Richmond. It was a very awkward piece of shaped land, didn't have a lot of you know, potential. And he said, you know what I think I'm gonna do? I think I'm gonna buy one of those oversized sheds that you can get from Lowe's, Home Depot, or one of them oversized sheds that come with two levels. I'm gonna put it on a foundation. I'm gonna bring utilities to it, and I'm gonna insulate it. I'm gonna make it like you know able to actually live in, and I'm gonna rent it out. And I mean, that's essentially what he's doing. He's renting out a tiny home. But I mean, the one thing that I like about that idea is that it, like, all of those bungalow homes and all of those craftsman style homes that we love in a lot of urban suburbs. Those was homes that was ordered from the Sears catalog back in the day, and literally flat packed and shipped to you, and you put it together with your own hands. And like, I think that's kind of the essence that the tiny home movement does bring, which is something I do appreciate, because it takes the complexity out of out of how to build a house from your ground up, because it's really not that hard, you know.
I'll do you one better. Most American suburbs, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of American suburbs were actually built by corporations. Think about Levittown, right? I know a lot of like the beautiful area, the beautiful homes in uptown Charlotte that are like right around uptown. All those were brought in, trucked in by Bank of America, so that people had homes that were really close to work. So
I didn't know that.
yeah, so and I learned this as an urban designer. We toured uptown Charlotte. And I was like, yeah, like these were trucked from different parts of the country. They were put on the truck, brought in to make Charlotte feel like it had a more diverse set of housing that it didn't have at the time. So the reality is, like, corporations play a lot in how we navigate, like home ownership and buying homes and selling homes. And like you said, a lot of these homes were pre-manufactured, even though we think, oh, this is beautiful. They came from Sears, you know? And so we're knocking these tiny home developers like, yes, it's not for us. It's not going to work for us. But the reality is like they're doing some service just like any other thing. We need more affordable houses, and we need different types of housing, because in the U.S. we only have rent, our single family attached, and now townhomes are starting to become more of a thing. But for the longest, I mean, my parents, they even looked down at townhomes. They're like, townhomes? No, we want the single family detached.
Hmm.
So we just need a different type of housing that isn't being offered right now, and nobody's really trying to really offer a different type.
That's a good point, and I'll admit that I think that the idea of the missing middle. We usually talk about that when we're talking about, like, dense urban for rent type of housing. But I do think that there is a missing middle in more suburban or pseudo urban for sale housing. And to your point, the idea of a tiny home, or even let's call it a micro unit, because I've seen row homes in Baltimore that are 950 square feet, two level, 950 square feet, like 12 feet wide. So it I mean, it's something that it's like, these tiny homes is not a new concept. The idea of micro living is not a new concept. Um, it's very much been a part of American history, and certainly in a lot of older American cities. Um, so to that point, I agree with you.
I do have a question though. If America pushes more towards tiny homes or let's say prefabricated homes,
X, you need to fix your internet.
I know I cut out. I was just saying, if how the architectural fee like affect the house. Like,
I don't think the architect
if I,
exists in that scenario.
I mean, does the architect exist now anyway with prefab homes? Like, I know there's an architect who does like probably the cut sheets for these home builders, but that's usually probably in house anyway. I don't think that really affects the architect. I mean, yeah, maybe even helps the architect because now you can have a specific style that you go for.
I don't think an architect exists in this scenario. I think that this whenever you get to the retailization of like the prefab product, why do you need an architect? Because you're just putting up four walls. I mean, you have an inventory of aesthetics that you can choose from. Do you want this to have a dormer? Do you want this to have a pitch roof? What kind of siding do you want? What do you want the interior to be? What's your finish? Like, where's an architect needed in that scenario?
so then, are you eliminating one of the roles of the architect? Like, are single family houses about to just be prefabricated?
Aren't they already? Most of
You
them
know,
already are kind of. I mean, they're not
mm,
prefabricated, but like
yeah.
you have a basically a cut sheet of a house in any of these new suburban developments where it's like, oh, this style, you have this style, you have this style, and you're just picking from a kit of parts anyway.
I think in sort of the home builder scenario, like Orion Homes and etc. I mean, I haven't been in that world, so I don't know. My assumption is that the only role in which an architect comes into play is that these homes still need to get permitted by the you still need to get a building permit by the area having jurisdiction, the AHJ.
That's easy money then.
But but I mean, we already know that the role of the architect is diminishing anyway. And wait until AI gets full and ready to take over. I mean, this same thing that you brought up about a single family home. What's stopping some sophisticated AI machine from doing that for multifamily residential? I think that the obviously the architect's value and role has been uh, diminishing over time, and it really has a lot to do with the fact that the profession as a whole years ago decided to make a decision to remove us from the builder role. The architect used to be the master builder and made us more of a white collar in the sky office in the high rise type of profession. um but I mean, yeah, it's a good point.
Hmm. X,
time
real
to
quick.
time to boost your LinkedIn profile.
If X is still with us, because he looked like he was scrolling to my screen, but like obviously, micro living is nothing new in New York, right? So, and obviously, not all parts of New York are the skyscrapers. There are a lot of low rise homes that are in New York, and I'm pretty sure Queens, probably parts of Brooklyn, and all that stuff. Maybe even the suburbs, but it's still connected by mass transit. I think areas like that would be perfect because obviously New York has an affordability issue. How do you see it playing out in a place like New York? Do you think it would fly?
No, New York is just getting more dense. If anything, they'll build more density in those areas than tiny homes. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, because the one thing
Yes.
I struggle with now with the way that development happens, and I saw it happen a little bit differently in Boston, but basically development in Boston was, I think the issue with development in the U.S. in general is that what happens is you have a corporation developer who comes in, buys a whole block of land, and then demolishes that entire block, and doesn't allow for piecemeal development because it's now you have to because you demolished the whole block, you have to now build a 6 story or taller, building on a podium, and now you've destroyed the whole character of a neighborhood for a mega block basically. Whereas in Boston, a lot of the apartments that were being built were 6 unit apartments instead of 300-unit apartments because you can build within a certain plot of land and kind of build up from there. So it gave a little bit more power to the landowner versus like having it be necessarily corporate and developer driven, big corporation, driven. So that's why I was kind of asking about the tiny home. I'm like, maybe that can help with affordability.
Well, I also think that that's a zoning issue because a lot of the new zoning master plans, sector plans, they favor the commercial developer. Like there's a lot of product type. So I was just out in LA last week, and the really nice thing about LA is that it's super super dense, but it's also very low rise. And it's super dense and low rise because it also offers like a lot of different housing type. You got the bungalows, you got the 4 unit courts, and it's a whole different types of product type. But also those things aren't allowed now per zoning. Like zoning now, you have to have a certain amount of dwelling units per acre and all this other stuff. So like LA is going through the process now to help address their affordability issue, to rewrite and eliminate some of those um, zoning laws that prevent this different variety of housing type. And I think that what that will spur is that will enable the small business mom and pop type of real estate investor, real estate developer to be more entrepreneurial and be able to do these infill type of developments without having to buy the whole block, just because one, that is it's consistent with the sector plan, or two, because of the cost of the land and all this other, like in order to make it work out, pencil out financially, you have to increase your density and all, and also the zoning code, the zoning code incentivize increased density.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. We just gotta get away from minimum parking ratio. I can't stand minimum parking ratios. Like we gotta get rid of that.
That
Like
too.
because I think that also stifles a lot of development because you build up a apartment complex, and let's say you don't have a like a Texas donut where you have the parking in the center, you have gravel parking lot right beside you, or parking lot next to the building. You can't infill that because you need that parking, and people get used to that parking. So let's get rid of minimum parking. Let's invest in some public transit, and then we can start talking about tiny homes.
No developer wants to build parking.
Oh, because they would like to max out with a big old square building. They want all the money.
Hey man, watch your mouth. Hey, but we coming up on time, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. It's a good discussion, man. I enjoyed hanging out with the fellas today. No shade to Whitney and Perla. I'll be happy when they're back and joining us, and they add so much value to the conversations at hand.
Who, Perla?
But it's
You
nice.
sure Perla adds value? Even when
I
she's not on the
wanted to be
podcast, she gets
known
smoke.
on record. I support Black women.
Wow.
Perla,
The thing
I
is, I ain't saying
support
nothing
you.
about Whitney. Whitney is a great value add. Perla, discard. We can move on without Perla.
I, you need an open hand, just smack to the face, man. You be so disrespectful to Perla, man.
Hey, they cancel people for smacking people, so be careful out here.
And I Will Smith is back.
He is. He
He
is.
back.
He is. I'm proud of him. Proud of the comeback.
Hey, but thank y'all for tuning in. This has been another episode of Auto Black. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know what you think, and catch y'all on the next one. Peace.
Be easy.
Hey everybody! Thank you for listening to this episode of AutoBlack. If you have enjoyed the discussion, please hit that subscribe button or follow button, whatever you'd like. AutoBlack is a discussion-based podcast that is unapologetically Black at the intersection of design and culture. We acknowledge that our experiences are just that, our experience, but your voice is worth elevating and your perspective is valid. So please join the conversation and connect with us on Instagram at AutoBlack_podcast, or email us your thoughts, comments, and even future topics you'd like us to discuss on The Stoop at AutoBlackPodcast@gmail.com. AutoBlack out. Bye!